Chapter 23. Long may he reign. For fuck's sake, what are those morons doing? Usually, Jaime would be exasperated with Bronn for using such colorful words in the company of other lords. But here and now, he found himself agreeing with the sentiment entirely. Before his eyes lay Riverrun and the disaster of a siege the Freys were conducting. To call whatever the Freys were doing a siege would be an insult to sieges of the past. There were no lookouts around the tents, no scouts, no defensive positions near the supply carts. Davos had to admit that he was really living in a fucked up world. Engines. All that the Freys have is a gallows built far away from the range of Tully archers. Jaime managed to settle himself on the ground from his horse. His two squires had rushed to aid him, but he paid them no mind. He may have lost his sword hand, but that didn't mean he was helpless. Sir Jaime? Sir Jaime, we didn't expect you this early, said Edwin Fry, who rushed towards him with a flustered look. That seems to be the problem, isn't it? No expectations, said Jaime before he walked forward, forcing Edwin Fry to trail behind him. Jaime took in the happenings unfold on the gallows where Sir Ryman Fry had Edmure Tully on a noose. He could make out several Freys nearby calling for the attention of Brynden Tully. Prominent among them was Black Walder, the bastard son of Walder Fry. He climbed up the stairs heedless of excuses spouted by Edwin Fry, only to be stopped by an unknown Fry halfway. He couldn't put a name to the face, and then again it didn't matter. There were too many Freys for his liking, and the less he knew the better. You are not allowed entry. Only those who have Sir Ryman's permission may enter, said the Fry. Truly? Jaime mocked with a glare before punching the fool straight on his left cheek with his metal hand as hard as he could. The force behind the swing saw the Fry flip over the stairs and kiss the ground with a groan. Anyone else want to stand in my way? He asked. Sadly, no one was keen to take up his challenge. He was soon joined by Bronn and Sir Island Payne. With his path clear, he climbed the rest of the steps. At the top, he found Black Walder pressing a knife to Edmure Tully's throat. Jaime threw his eyes across the field and rested on the unflinching visage of Brynden Tully. He could only make out a faint outline of the man, but he was sure it was the Blackfish. The Tully was hardly moved by the Frey's threats. Jaime made his way towards Edmure Tully, and by now the rest of the Freys were taking notice of his presence. He counted 10 Freys, all from the pinched Weasley faces. Now they notice, he thought with derision. This is the family my aunt married into. No wonder father spoke of grandfather with such hate. Sir Payne, cut Lord Edmure loose. I think he needs a bath before we speak, he ordered, and Sir Island Payne made his way to cut Edmure loose. Wait, Sir Jaime. You must not do that. Edmure is my prisoner, said Sir Ryman in protest, and made to stop Island Payne only to freeze at Bronn's sword point. When you address me, take care to omit "must" from your vernacular, said Jaime with a glare, and nodded to Sir Island Payne, who promptly cut Edmure loose. I will be holding a council soon, but first I must speak with Sir Brynden Tully. As of this moment, this siege is under my command, said Jaime before he swiftly made his way back while Sir Island escorted Edmure away. Be careful out there, Sir Jaime. Wouldn't want my benefactor to die so soon, commented Bronn. The Blackfish is an old man, scoffed Jaime, and you have only one hand. A betting man would side with Brynden fucking Tully any time of the day, said Bronn with a shrug. Sometimes I wonder which side you are on, Sir Bronn. Yours, unfortunately. I could be a happy and wealthy man if you Lannisters stopped jumping into trouble every fucking day, said Bronn. Well, the man is not wrong, Jaime thought amusedly. I enjoy these chats, Sir Bronn. But now is the time for the lion to greet the trout, said Jaime as he climbed atop his horse. Do keep the Freys away from our guest. With that said, Jaime galloped his horse towards the castle. It took a few moments of waiting, but Jaime finally saw the drawbridge lowering. When the bridge finally settled down, he let out a silent sigh of relief before he dismounted from his horse. His armor clinked with each step he took towards the castle. His boots were sinking into the sand wet with blood and slime, but he paid it no heed. His attention was rather focused on the man walking towards him from the other end. There was hardly any change on Blackfish's face since he last saw the man. The man wore the same helm that bore a black trout for a crest and an armor that reminded Jamie of fish scales. Only the man's skin stood out as the rest of the attire was covered in black. "Kingslayer," said Tully. Jamie barely held off the urge to grit his teeth or even make a snarky comment. The old me would have done so without a thought, but now there was no point in letting tempers fly, and he remembered his duty. "Blackfish," he responded, and he thought it to be an appropriate response. "Thank you for coming to meet me. I assume you are here to fulfill your vows made to my niece," said Sir Brindan. "You promised to bring Sansa and Arya Stark unharmed in return for your freedom. Yet they are nowhere to be seen." Brindan Tully may have not known it, but Jamie felt a combination of shame and guilt at the thought of that oath. The fate that befell Catelyn Stark and her children were cruel, and he would gladly pay for those sins in the seven hells. But here and now, he had no choice but to continue onwards for the sake of his son. "I do not have them," he found himself say, and he was thankful that his voice remained flat. "Your old cell is available. Is that why you are here?" "I'm afraid not, sir. I prefer my freedom to your cell." "I see. Not surprising. What else can I expect from a Lannister other than lying, cheating and backstabbing? Honorless cunts, a lot of them, chief among them your father," said Brindan Tully. "House Lannister had nothing to do with what happened to your niece and her son," said Jamie, ignoring all the insults. "Other than offering rewards for Walder Frey and his filthy family for a job well done." Jamie could hardly detect a hint of emotion from the Blackfish. But he could read the man from his face. The Blackfish was looking at him the same way Eddard Stark looked at him when the Northern Lord found him sitting on the Iron Throne with the Mad King's blood on his blade. "I came to speak with you of the siege, not the dead. You can save Edmure if I hand over Riverrun." "Is this where you threatened to kill Edmure?" Brindan Tully was now looking at him with cold, hardened eyes. "Both my nieces are dead. I have lost my brother, my king, and many good friends, yet here I stand. I am willing to lose my nephew as well. But I will not lose my home to some filthy rats and a one-armed honorless cur." Jamie's good hand itched to punch the man, but he let that feeling pass. The Blackfish spoke true. He had no honor, and he did come to ensure some filthy rats, namely the Freys, gain a castle. "Your house's words are family duty, honor, is it not? I shall release Edmure to your custody, and allow you and your men safe passage to the Vale where the last of your blood survives. Robert Arryn is a child, a motherless child. I am sure he will appreciate his mother's family in the Eyrie." Jamie hoped against hope that Tully would accept. He found no pleasure in doing this, being an instrument to his family's shoddy allies. But he has to endure for Tommen's sake. Tommen is his last living child, and no matter what, he will protect his son from their enemies. Another promise from a Lannister. "It is easy as breathing for you, I imagine, to make vows and break them in the next breath," said Sir Brindan with a derisive snort. "What is your word worth, Lannister? What is your worth?" Jamie felt these queries as arrows that punched through his armor. "Truly, what is my worth?" he asked himself, and the answer was not so hard to find. "Nothing. I am worth nothing." A long time ago he was worth something. In the Kingswood, he faced the Smiling Knight and the Brotherhood with Ser Arthur Dayne and Ser Barristan Selmy of the King's Guard. And me, that boy I was. When did he die, I wonder? When I donned the white cloak? When I opened Aerys' throat? That boy had wanted to be Ser Arthur Dayne, but someplace along the way he had become the Smiling Knight instead. "If not my word, then you have the word of King Tommen," said Jamie. "Trust between men holds value when that trust is supplemented with honor. What do you know of honor, Kingslayer? What does your bastard know of honor? Ser Brynden, consider peace, if not for your family's sake then for your men. Riverrun is surrounded and alone. Piper, Vance, Muten, Mallister, and all the other river lords have surrendered and now marches with my army. The Blackwoods are pinned down by the Brackens in Raventree Hall. No one is fighting for your cause. We can end this war here and no one else needs to die. It was a last desperate attempt by Jaime to avoid a battle and end this rebellion peacefully. Taking Riverrun would be costly in a battle, and he loathed to send good men to their deaths so that the Freys can have a castle. I have enough provisions to last my men for a year. If I stretch it, maybe another year as well. What are you going to fight with Kingslayer? Do you have time, patience, and grain to stay outside my castle for a year? I guess not, said Brynden before turning to leave. Wait. Let's settle this matter between the two of us. We fight instead of our men and the winner gets nothing. I am not interested in fighting a cripple. With you dead, those morons will once again be in charge of the siege. I'd be forced to watch those bumbling buffoons scurry around like rats outside my home. Said Ser Brynden, you clearly have no intention to keep the peace between us. Why did you even agree to this meeting? Jaime asked, incensed with Blackfish's stubborn attitude. Sieges are dull and I wanted to take the measure of you. Ser Brynden now looked at him with disgust. And I have to say, I am disappointed. Jaime watched Ser Brynden Tully return to the safety of Riverrun, and the drawbridge was raised once more. He returned to the camp disappointed that he failed to secure peace and end the conflict. So, what will it be? Asked Bronn once Jaime dismounted from his horse. We will have to take Riverrun from Brynden Tully's cold dead hands, said Jaime, bitterly thinking about all the deaths that this battle would cause. Oh fuck, said Bronn. Indeed, Jaime agreed. It will be no easy task to take Riverrun. The castle is surrounded by a moat. Many men will die trying to form a bridge of sorts. Siege towers would be useless in this case for the most part, other than being a distraction. Besides, it will take a lot of time to build them, time that he did not have. There is also the problem of grain. His army is numerous, but that means he had more mouths to feed than Tully. He already wasted a good portion of time on his march from Harrenhal to Riverrun. The bloody rain had turned the roads muddy, and the consistent harassment by the Brotherhood without banners had dwindled their supplies. A long siege is not an affordable option anymore. Riverrun has to dip the banners as soon as possible. It was not just Riverrun he has to deal with, as the Blackwoods are also in rebellion against the crown. Then there is the Brotherhood and the new enemy in the Stormlands to be dealt with. Enemies are converging on all sides, and I know what must be done. Jaime thought grimly, looking at the castle of Riverrun. The Freys were too stupid to properly use the Lord of Riverrun, but he won't make that same mistake. The morning light illuminated the palace that housed Queen Daenerys in the city of Volantis. Tyrion ran his hands along the wall as he walked the hallways, marveling at the smoothness of the construction. Considering the palace belonged to the former Archon of Volantis, it was most likely built by the Valyrians. He had read about the liquid stone famously used by the Valyrians in constructing their cities and the rest of SOC colonies. Valyrian glyphs adorned the halls with etchings of dragons layered in between. Beautiful chandeliers covered in gold and silver adorned the ceilings. The floors were layered with white marble. Outside the palace, a beautiful garden stretched out, on which the queen's dragons lounged happily to bask in the hot eastern sun. The queen, on the other hand, held court in the palace, and it was there he wanted to go. An unsullied soldier held out the door for him, and Tyrion slowly made his way into the great hall. Queen Daenerys sat on a white marble throne dressed in the finest Myrish silk gown. The hall was littered with pillars, each painted in different colors. Fortunately, he found the court empty sans Ser Barristan, who was quietly engaged in what he assumed was a humorous conversation, as evident by their smiles. He assumed the Lord Commander was regaling the Queen with another tale of Prince Rhaegar's misadventures. From what he heard so far, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen enjoyed many such misadventures, and yet many were surprised at the greatest misadventure of all at Harrenhal. Your Grace, Ser Barristan. He greeted cordially as he gave a shallow bow to the Queen. Lord Tyrion, I was under the impression that you were overseeing the transfer of gold from the treasury. Not just gold, Your Grace. There are many treasures you would find interesting, but I digress. Lord Varys has sent word from Lys, said Tyrion as he handed over a scroll of parchment that was delivered to him later this morning by a small boy. He patiently waited for the Queen to read the parchment. It seems your suggestion to send Vagon Roger has bared fruit. The Lyseni have agreed to open their ports and allow our fleets safe passage through their waters, said Queen Daenerys with a smile. The Roger family in Volantis is only an extension of the main branch. Lys is where the main branch of House Roger lives. Vagon Roger's ancestor was supposedly exiled from Lys following the fall of their bank. It was a good thing that we also have the backing of Maestros Maegor, said Tyrion. I was meaning to ask about that, Lord Tyrion. I couldn't help but notice the man holds you in contempt, and yet is eager to support me for some reason. If I am to believe Varys, Maestros Maegor rallied in the Senate for an immediate surrender. You are right on both counts, Your Grace. I suppose you could not have known that Maestros lost his sister to my father's plot to have the Starks killed at the twins. This is the first I'm hearing of this matter, said Daenerys, now looking far more interested. Please do explain. Talisa Maegor is the elder sister of Maestros Maegor. From what I understand, the woman disapproved of slavery and left Volantis for Westeros. Somehow she wound up attracting the eye of Robb Stark, and they married. She was later killed by the Freys in the Red Wedding, explained Tyrion, and now Maestros Maegor wants revenge, deduced Daenerys, making Tyrion nod. He sees you as the path to Westeros and his best chance to pay a visit to House Frey. Hence his support for your campaign. I see. What do you think of Lord Maestros? Asked Daenerys. A man driven by revenge is a danger to his enemies and friends. But so long as we can channel the man's sense of vengeance against our common enemies, he will remain useful. Undoubtedly, we will have to depend on his contacts in Tyrosh. It might be possible we can cut our travel plans with the man's help, said Tyrion. How can we cut our travel plans? Asked Daenerys. If Tyrosh is cooperative, we can launch our fleets from Tyrosh and capture Evenfall Hall. This can speed up our travel plan, as we can easily avoid launching our fleets from Pentos. Can Maestros Maegor arrange for Tyrosh to cooperate and ensure the city remains a stable launching ground for our fleets? Asked Daenerys curiously. Most likely, Your Grace, said Tyrion with a nod. We were fortunate then, commented Ser Barristan. Indeed we were, sir. Lord Varys also writes that he came in contact with Yara Greyjoy and Theon Greyjoy. He writes that they may become useful allies, said Daenerys with a frown before she rolled up the parchment and handed it over to Ser Barristan. The Greyjoys are in open rebellion against the Iron Throne, but I won't count them as a reliable ally. Robb Stark trusted Theon Greyjoy, and the squid stabbed him in the back. Last I heard, Theon Greyjoy killed Brandon and Rickon Stark when he took Winterfell. So, you would advise me to avoid the Greyjoys altogether? Asked Daenerys. Nothing good has ever come out with trusting the Ironborn. While the advantages are great, the potential disaster that would entail if an alliance is formed outlasts any advantage. Keeping this in mind, Tyrion went for steering the Queen away from an open alliance. Not avoid, Your Grace. I would advise caution. They are good sailors and undoubtedly useful in a military campaign, but they have little difference from the slave masters of Essos. A good Ironborn is a dead Ironborn, said Tyrion. The Ironborn are despised by everyone in Westeros. Any gain from their aid we stand to get will be negated with the hostility from our other allies, said Ser Barristan, only to receive a curious look from the Queen. If Your Grace seeks to form an alliance with Prince Daeron in the north, the Ironborn will only be a hindrance, explained Tyrion. I see, nodded the Queen in understanding. On the other hand, having the support of Ironborn gives you an advantage in the seas. I'd still wait for Varys to deliver us more information regarding the Greyjoys before making a decision, Your Grace. Very well. The Queen agreed to Tyrion's relief. In war, assumptions were dangerous. He learned that lesson from Robb Stark, who trusted blindly and lost a kingdom because of blind trust. Your Grace. The sound of Missandei approaching the Queen distracted him from his thoughts. What is it, Missandei? Asked Daenerys. The High Priest Benero of the Red Temple and Priestess Melisandre seeks your audience. Didn't you inform them I'm not holding court today? I did, Your Grace. But the High Priest insists on an audience. He says the Priestess Melisandre was sent to Volantis by your nephew. Now, that caught his attention. How did Daeron Targaryen manage to come in contact with a priestess of Red Temple in the north? And then his eyes widened in recognition. Is this the same Melisandre, the Red Priestess who advised Stannis Baratheon in Westeros? He asked curiously. I know not, Lord Tyrion. Said Missandei. I advise extreme caution while dealing with the Red Priestess, Your Grace. This is a woman who claimed Stannis Baratheon is a reborn mythical hero and managed to make him believe it, the most stubborn man in Westeros. He cautioned the Red Priests were helpful in Meereen, and continues to help us in Volantis. Said Daenerys after a moment of silence. Send them in, Missandei. Tyrion was familiar with Benero, the High Priest of the Red Temple of Volantis. While he put no faith in any gods, he has to admit Benero is a convincing public figure. It was really hard for people to disbelieve in the Red God when its priest openly manipulated flames. At first, Tyrion had assumed Benero a liar and a hack like all the Septons and Septas back home. So one day, he managed to worm his way into the Red Temple to see for himself, and it was there he watched with his own eyes Benero manipulating the flames. It was in no way proof of the Red God's existence. At the very least, it proved Benero had magical powers, which is more than what he could say about the useless Septons back home. Please accept our humble greetings, Queen Daenerys. Greeted the High Priest Benero with a shallow bow. The Red Priests were a major factor in keeping peace in Meereen. And I'm aware I have you to thank for peace in Volantis. Said Daenerys. We do the Lord's work and nothing else, Your Grace. Said Benero in a heavily accented common tongue. Then your lord must have been a heavily betting man for him to ask Lady Melisandre to support Stannis Baratheon. Said Tyrion, only to receive a not-so-friendly warning glare from the Queen. Please forgive Lord Tyrion if he offended you. He tends to speak without care from time to time. Said Daenerys, giving him a warning glare. We take no offense, Your Grace. Said Benero with an easy smile. The Lord show us signs, but we flawed creatures misinterpret the will of the divine. Lady Melisandre was exactly where she ought to be, in this case. Through Stannis Baratheon, she met the Prince of the Prophecy. I speak, of course, about your nephew, Your Grace. I thought the mythical hero reborn was the Queen? Asked Tyrion, taking care to take the edge out of his tone. The Queen has a role to play, and she is indeed the part of the prophecy. She will be the fire to ignite the Lightbringer. Said Benero, the mythical blade wielded by Azor Ahai, I imagine? Don't tell me our Queen has to forge a blade? Snarked Tyrion. She need not forge the blade, Lord Tyrion. The Queen is already in possession of the blade. Said Benero before eyeing the Queen with a placid smile. Is she not? Tyrion looked between the Queen and the Red Priests, confused by, and so did Sir Barristan and Missandei. I do possess the blade in question. A story for another time. Said Daenerys, seeing his curiosity. But I don't know how to ignite the blade, as you say, High Priest Benero. You have already done so, Your Grace. You brought life to dragons and wake them from stone. Magic is rising around the world, and the blade will ignite when the two halves become one. Said Benero, indeed, Your Grace. The blade is merely a medium, as the true Lightbringer is the prince himself. Piped up Melisandre. By unleashing magic from the chains of bondage, you ignited the fire slumbering within the prince's soul. Just as all the undead flock to the great other, the living will flock to the prince. Dragons will burn his enemies, ravens will whisper secrets to him from four corners of the world, wolves will hunt for him, bears will grapple with his enemies, the mountains will shield him, forests will provide him in his journey, seas will dance to his will, and fire will ever be his friend lighting his way forward. Now wasn't that convenient? It amused him how common it is among all the religions to have all-powerful do-gooder heroic figure to rally around. The first men had mythical figures like Garth Greehan, Brandon the Builder, Lon the Clever, and many others from the Age of Heroes and Dawn Age. The Undals have Hydra of the Hill. The Valerians clearly had their prophecies and magic to feel good about themselves. The Red Priests have their promised prince and a mythical sword. Come to think of it, many of the SOC religions held faith in the same mythical figure of the last hero. The stories and names may vary with language and culture, but all of them agree on the existence of the mythical figure. Distracted by his thoughts, he nearly missed the rest of the conversation between the Queen and the Red Priests. "What do you ask of me, Lady Melisandre?" asked Daenerys. "We seek your aid in collecting every Valyrian steel weapon we can find in the city, Your Grace." The prince fought the demons beyond the wall, and he says only weapons made from Valyrian steel and dragon glass can kill the enemy. Valyrian steel is not exactly and cheap and is rarely in possession of wealthy families. The old families of Volantis may hold some Valyrian steel weapons, but they won't part with their prized possession. He warned, dreading an escalation in the city just when they were ready to sail away. "What is dragon glass?" asked Daenerys after giving him an acknowledging nod. "Frozen fire, Your Grace," said Melisandre. Tyrion barely held back a scoff at the ridiculous name the Red Priestess gave the element. "Obsidian is the term, Your Grace. It was very commonly used in Valyria according to maesters," he supplied. "I have read about old stories of first men and children of forest using dragonglass as weapons. In fact, there is a considerable deposit of dragonglass and dragonstone." "I see." The Queen hummed to herself before turning her attention to the Red Priests. "My nephew specifically asked for Valyrian steel and dragonglass weapons?" "Yes, Your Grace." Also, the prince requested the aid of as many Shadowbinders and Red Priests as possible for the Great War, said Melisandre. Tyrion could feel a headache growing just thinking about the monumentally stupid idea of bringing more Red Priests and sorcerers to the shores of Westeros. Matters were further made worse with the Queen's obvious interest in magic, myths and prophecies. It would seem he will have to stem the tide of Red Priests some other way lest a religious war breaks out in Westeros. For centuries, the Blackwoods and Brackens have fought each other in the field of battle. This was a common occurrence before Aegon's conquest. After the Seven Kingdoms were united, the battles between the two houses thinned out, but their rivalry was never forgotten. Children born into both houses from an early age were taught to consider the other as their enemies. Oftentimes this rivalry had spilt into tourneys, politics and wars, rare as it may be under Targaryen rule. It has often been the curse of Riverlands to have the most number of quarreling houses. Their disunity had often led foreign kingdoms to invade and conquer their land. It was this same disunity that placed Riverlands under the yoke of Ironborn before Aegon's arrival. It was this same disunity that crippled Riverlands instead of properly defending themselves against the Lannister invasion. For a brief moment, the Riverland houses were united behind the young wolf at the height of the War of Five Kings. But that unity fell apart because of the treachery of Freys and Boltons. With the destruction of Stark armies, Riverlands once again fell into infighting and chaos. Loyalties were shifted overnight. Neighbors and former allies now stood on opposing sides, fighting each other to the bitter end. Some switched sides faced with no choice, while others did so simply out of greed. Tytos Blackwood knew this better than anyone, and yet he chose the harder path. He knew the moment word reached him about the Red Wedding his house was in danger from the Brackens. It was only a matter of time before the Brackens turn on his land to curry favor with the Iron Throne. So, the best path would have been to submit to the Iron Throne. Instead, he decided to rebel. he lost his second son Lucas in the Red Wedding. He assumed Jonas Bracken would support him, as the Lannisters and Freys have been very cruel to the Brackens. The Mountain had raped one of the man's daughter, and many Brackens were slain at the Red Wedding. But despite all that, Bracken decided to turn his cloak. The moment Tytos raised his banners against the ill-born bastard sitting on the Iron Thorn, Jonas Bracken switched sides. Despite seeing the folly and continuing to rebel, Tytos decided to stand his ground and refused to take down the direwolf banners fluttering proudly alongside the Blackwood banner. He swore a vow to Robb Stark, and he intended to keep it till he is forced otherwise. Despite Jonas Bracken's siege, the Blackwoods still held Raventree Hall, and by the old gods, they will continue to hold it. Tytos always considered Jonas a buffoon, and he was proven right. The man could hardly hold a proper siege. Then again, Bracken needs to do little other than wait outside the wall of Raventree Hall. There were half-hearted attempts to scale the walls and some sorties, but otherwise the siege has been dull. "Papa!" His little girl ran into his solar excitable with tinkling laughter, and his heavy heart lightened promptly. He picked up his little Bethany and placed her on his lap. He pressed a peck on her little forehead, earning him a giggle from his only daughter. It has been dark days for his family. His second son was slain at the Twins, and his youngest son had fallen ill 2 days ago. With the siege going on, the Maester lacked proper supplies to treat his youngest son. At this point, Tytos was praying to the old gods to save his son's life. In these trying times, Bethany has been his sole ray of light in the darkness. "Haven't I told you not to run in the castle?" He pinched her nose playfully many times, but running is fun, his daughter said with a laugh that showed off her teeth. "Oh, how innocent you are, my sweet Bethany. I hope you will laugh like this all your life. I hope you will always stay a child so that I could protect you from the cruel world outside. Would running be fun if you fall, young lady?" He admonished her lightly, to which Bethany pouted. "I won't run if you take me to the walls to see the climbing men, Papa." "Climbing men?" He frowned. "Yes. Hoster told me of the climbing men, Papa." "Why are they climbing our walls, Papa?" "Well, they climb because they are bad guests. Now, enough of this talk. Let me see where your Nan is, young lady." Later, he joined the men on the southern walls with his 2 sons Brynden and Hoster. "Anything to report, Sir Rashford?" Tytos asked as he joined the captain of his household guards. "2 attempts were made to scale the walls last night, my lord. They were thwarted, and we killed 5 men with no losses on our side," said Sir Rashford with a pleased grin. Tytos knew the man was itching to take the fight to the Brackens. But Tytos also knew there was no point in fighting the Brackens. He had held out hope when word reached him of the Knights of the Vale making a move. Unfortunately, they did not deign to visit Raventree Hall or Riverrun for that matter. Being pinned down inside his castle has deprived him of any happenings of the rest of the world. He knew the Lannister host is marching on Riverrun, as Jonas Bracken was all too happy to inform him. The fool probably thought he could force a surrender with that bit of news out in the open. "There is no doubt I will have to surrender, but it won't be to a Bracken." "Father, should we not sortie out and give a proper response to Lord Bracken?" asked Brynden. "There is no strategic value to such an attack, son. We would only lose men just as Jonas lost his in his latest attempt," said Tytos, shaking his head. "There is still a chance we could crush the Bracken's father." "To what end? Even if we did manage to break Bracken's host, we will suffer heavy casualties. Later on, we will be swept away by the Lannister army. It is better that we conserve our strength and hope Blackfish can perform a miracle against the Lannisters." "I don't think there will be any miracle, my lord. Without the North supporting us, we are done for," said Sir Rashford grimly. Tytos shook his head and looked at the direwolf banner. He flew beside the Blackwood banner. He was still a lord of the Kingdom of North and Trident. Despite the helplessness of the cause, he will not dishonor the vow he made to King Robb. "The rest of the world may turn their back on honor, but my ancestors will curse me if I forgot my honor. I am a Blackwood, and that name means something. A loud screech gave pause to his thoughts. Did you hear that? He asked the others, to which they nodded and looked around in confusion. All of them looked to Bracken's siege lines, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. Then another screech was heard, and this time Tytos looked up only to stumble back in fear as a dragon swooped in from the sky. The wind nearly blew him away, but he managed to hold his ground. Brimden had Hoster in a tight grip to prevent being blown off by the violent winds. Tytos rushed over to the walls, and so did his men and children. Together they watched as the dragon set the Bracken camps on fire. Screams of men filled the air, and Tytos looked away from the scene of men running around covered in fire. This was no war, it was just pure slaughter. He nearly threw up when the winds carried the smell of burnt flesh into his nostrils. Many of his men and his children were not lucky enough to hold their stomachs. He could not believe what he was seeing. The dragon made several more passes and slaughtered the men outside his walls. The siege lines outside were now charred ashes, with many of the survivors fleeing for their lives. He could not see any brave men trying to fight the dragon. The dragon made a few more passes over the Bracken men and set up a wide arc of fire that trapped the men from making an escape. He sweated nervously when he noticed the dragon was now flying towards his castle. Do not fire any arrows. Do not make a move to attack the dragon. He shouted over the top of his lungs when he noticed several archers drawing on their bowstrings. Do not fire those arrows, you fools. We will be ashes, and you would not even scratch its scales. He managed to keep the men steady despite the situation they were facing. The men quickly pulled themselves back, screaming in fear as the dragon perched itself on the walls of his castle. The dragon let out a terrifying roar that rattled his bones. He could see many men were on their knees praying and crying. Another coarse odor seeped into the air that let him know that a few men were shitting themselves. The dragon lowered its neck, and a well-groomed young man climbed down from the dragon's back. "Where is Lord Tytos Blackwood?" asked the dragon rider. Tytos hesitantly raised his hand and stepped forward with shaky legs. The dragon's yellow eyes pierced his very being, and it huffed out a puff of flames in a warning. He gulped at the display of power and looked helplessly at the dragon rider. At that moment, he knew that the lives of his family and his men were in the hands of the dragon rider. "I am Tytos Blackwood." He introduced himself, and took care to add as much deference into his tone. "I am Daeron Targaryen, and I have come with glad tidings," said the dragon rider, who called himself a Targaryen. Tytos was not so sure of the rider's claim. He knew no Targaryen with that name among the living. The dragon rider standing before him hardly sported any Valyrian features, as well apart from the lithe build of the body and the light skin tone. Despite all that, who was he to argue with someone with a dragon under his command? "Shall I bend the knee?" asked Tytos. "I'd rather we talk and deal with the rest of Bracken men for a start before anything else." "What say you, Lord Blackwood?" said Daeron, "if that be your wish." Tytos bowed his head in acquiescence. Tytos nodded to Sir Rashford, indicating to the Brackens outside the castle walls. The knight understood immediately, and he rushed away from the walls, collecting men on the way. "Regal, so vitus," said Daeron, which made the dragon take off into the skies. "Lead the way, my lord." Tytos led Daeron Targaryen to his solar. On the way, he noticed a few salient features of his new guest. Daeron wore an armor, mostly plate by the looks of it, but his eye went to the Targaryen sigil painted on its surface. The true find, however, was the wolf heads etched on the sides of the cuirass. He noticed Daeron did not wear any cloak, which was odd. Then again, he could understand the need to abandon cloak when flying on a dragon's back. "The kingdom of North and Trident is dead. I hope you have come to terms with that, my lord." "Yes, your grace," he answered honestly. "As you can guess, I am interested in uniting the 7 kingdoms under the Targaryen banner once again. The North has already pledged its allegiance to my cause, as I am half Stark. The Boltons are dead. The Umbers are dead. The Karstarks have bent the knee. The Riswells and Dustons are no longer great houses of the north. My cousin Rickon is now Lord of Winterfell, and Lady Sansa stands by his side helping him to rule," said Daeron before pausing at a window overlooking the dead weirwood tree. "I seek to bring fire and blood to the enemies of my house. There is a debt I have to pay in blood and death to House Frey and Lannister, and it is long overdue. So my question is, would you care to join me in my quest, my lord?" "Your Grace." Tytos took a deep breath as he bends his knee. House Blackwood swears its fealty to Daeron of House Targaryen. There was hardly any need for him to rethink this decision. Besides, he was very interested in how the Starks and the North were involved in this new development. Long may he reign.